Welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my 6.5 ton electric log splitter made by Wen. You can find this on Amazon. I think they currently go for around $300. The price fluctuates. Now, I received this as a gift from my family in December, Christmas time of 2021. It's currently March of 2022, and as you can see, I've been using this thing quite a bit. So after having this thing for 3 months, I can tell you what works about it, what doesn't work, and just my overall impressions of this unit. So first things first, I know what most of you are thinking. Well, how can a $300 electric log splitter be any good? Well, let me tell you, anything that you can lift up and put on this splitting table, it'll go through it. I was really impressed with how much power this thing actually has. I mean, sure, a 30 ton or 27 ton log splitter will go through anything, but really, this thing, anything that you can physically lift up and put on this table, it'll really go through it. Now, the only thing I've struggled with getting through are these are probably like 22 or 24 inch rounds. This is red oak. Now, in order to get this up onto my table, I do have a logging jib crane, which if you look through some of my videos, look up logging jib crane trailer, and you'll see how that thing kind of works. But it will go through these, but when you're splitting rounds this large, you have to like start on the edge and chip away here, chip away here. Quite oftentimes, especially something really hard like oak, if you try to go right through the center, it'll probably, well, I mean, it's going to try, but it'll stop, and then you got to reposition the wedge and then try here. But basically, when you're going through larger, really hardwood pieces like this, you just got to work the wedge a little bit and know how to work around that. So, yeah, really impressive unit. So, I want to talk about the modifications I've done to this. And really, the only modification that I've really done to this is basically build this steel table on the other side of the splitter. Now, when you buy this unit, you see this orange kind of cradle. Well, there's orange cradles on either side of the main wedge here. That doesn't really work out too well because when you go to split a piece of wood, what'll happen, because there's no table when you first buy this thing, you split the piece and normally one half kind of falls off. You got to go around and pick it up. Well, that's no good. Nobody wants to bend over and pick up wood. So this is the first and really the only modification I did to this. So I made this out of some steel that I had laying around. And what I wanted to do, my idea behind this, is I wanted to utilize the pre-existing mounting holes. So with this orange cradle, there's a bolt hole towards the front and a bolt hole towards the rear. So basically I just utilized those two mounting locations. There's like a flange on this metal table, so I just drilled a little hole on either side of this steel, and then I was able to utilize those two mounting holes. But of course, we needed some type of brace, something to support the underside of this. So I had a piece, I don't know, this is maybe 1/2 inch rod. So I welded on a little nut to the bottom of the frame, and then I did the same thing to the top, but it's actually welded onto that bolt. So in theory, if you wanted to, you could just remove this bolt, and remove that little cotter pin that holds on that 1/2 inch rod through that nut down there, and you could remove this table in case we ever need to do that for maintenance or whatever. So this table is an absolute must in my opinion. If you're splitting a lot of wood like I am, you got to build something. I mean, you can get creative, you can do what you want, you can build a wooden workbench on the other side, but in my opinion, if you have the tools and ability to, it's best if you can make some type of table that is pitched so that the wood will kind of roll towards the main wedge right here. That would be best, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. Just get creative. So let's talk about what I did today. Now, after about 2 months of owning this orange cradle on my side of the machine actually tore away. The bolts actually stripped out of where they threaded into this machine, and this piece just kind of tore off. So this morning I actually had this in the shop and I just welded this sucker on here, and now it's not going anywhere. So that's one small complaint I have. Also, another complaint that I have, if we come around to the other side of the machine over here, I can loosen this up, slide this to hit the back of this piece of steel right here, tighten up this bolt, and then what happens, that piston will only retract as far as this stopper will let it. Now this is a great idea because this saves a lot of time especially when you're working with similar size pieces. However, this was not executed as well as it could have been. And the problem I have is oftentimes I'll crank this sucker down, but it's really fidgety. Sometimes it'll just start sliding back, and then I have to slide the piston forward and relock it down. So this really could use some improvement, but I mean, it works. I just wish it was designed a bit better. Now, while we're over on this side of the splitter, pay attention to this little petcock right here. So this is actually the vent, and it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So according to the instructions, when you're transporting this unit, you want to keep this vent tight. You want to close it all the way to the right. Also, if you leave it outside, it's probably a good idea to leave it closed when you're not using it. However, when you're using it, it's important to loosen up this vent to allow air pressure locked up in the hydraulic system to vent out. So that's really important to note where that is and how to use that. Also, underneath that piston, see there's a little Allen head. It's kind of dark, I know, but that is where you fill up hydraulic oil. Now, if you're in a cold weather climate like me, the instructions say to fill this up with dextrose or Dextron ATF. And I actually did have to add probably half a quart to this hydraulic system for the first time today. So I'd imagine it's a cheap piston. Maybe the seal's a little bit leaky. Maybe they didn't fill it up completely from the factory. I'm not 100% sure, but rest assured, if you get low on hydraulic fluid, just add a little bit of Dextron ATF. And there is a dipstick attached to that Allen head bolt, and then you just have to make sure that hydraulic fluid is within the two lines on that dipstick. Also, I should note that when you are filling and or checking the hydraulic fluid, you need to tilt this vertically. Right now it sits horizontally. You got to just tilt it vertically and let that end of the splitter sit directly on the ground. While we have the camera on this side of the machine, we can talk about how it actually works. Well, in order to operate this ram, you need to do two things. You need to press down and hold this green button, which in turn turns on the hydraulic motor. And then to actually move the ram, you need to push down on this lever while you're holding down this green button. Now, a nice feature about this unit is as long as you're holding down this lever, this piston will not retract. So, say I just went through a 16-inch piece, I don't have my stopper set, and I'm ready to roll it back and reposition it along the wedge. What I can do is I can lift up on this lever, slide back the pusher, and then roll the piece in, so that way I can start again without having to let that ram retract all the way, if that makes sense. So that is actually quite a handy feature. Now, I've actually thought about defeating the safety mechanism, but I found that there's been a few instances where I wanted to put my hand in the way of danger. So as of this point in time, I'm not going to defeat any of these safety mechanisms. I think it's good to have both hands on the controls, so that way you don't risk putting your hand in the way of danger. Now, really important safety precaution: if you're splitting wood that is frozen, or if you're splitting a piece that has like an angled cut on it, and you go to put it along the back of this splitter, you got to be really careful, because this has happened to me quite a few times. What'll happen is, as you're pushing, or well, as the ram's extending, what could happen is this piece, as it pushes on this backing plate, it'll actually pop up and it could hit you in the face, hit you in the jaw. So if you're splitting a dangerous piece, I'd recommend you stay far back away over here, keep your arms extended, and just after you work with this a while, you learn how to split those pieces, how to try and avoid that from happening. So my advice to you is, if you are splitting a piece that does have an angled cut, try and put that angled cut down, so that way when the ram starts pushing on that piece, it digs down, as opposed to if you have the angle up like this, it could pop out. Another little complaint that I want to make about this splitter is the frame is a little rickety. It's a little wobbly. I'd recommend taking some blocks of wood and putting it underneath the wheels to make sure that it's kind of level at all times, because if you're trying to split wood and the machine's pitched, If you go to lift up a heavy piece, you have the risk of this thing tumbling over. But I suppose if you wanted to make everything a bit more rigid, if you have a welder handy, you could just weld up the really thin square tubing. That'll definitely make it more rigid, but overall, aside from that, this has been such an incredible splitter. So without further ado, let's start splitting some wood and you can see how well it actually works. Now, another thing that I really like about this electric splitter is it's light. It's light to the point where you could lift up on the handle on this side of the splitter and you could wheel this around, move it to where you want to go. All you need to make sure is that you're within reach of a 15 amp extension cord and outlet. But the great thing about that is, as I keep splitting wood, I can just lift up one side of this splitter, wheel it down a little bit, and I can just keep this splitter real close to my wood stack. Now, if we're talking about a gas splitter, I mean, those things weigh really heavy. Normally they have a ball hitch, so you got to hook it up to your ATV, your lawnmower, your truck if you want to move it. So, yes, it's gonna struggle when you're trying to split through, 22-inch rounds of red oak. But at the end of the day, this thing has just been such an incredible splitter. All right, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna hit the green button to turn on the motor. I'm gonna push down on this lever, and I'm gonna have this pushing part of the ram come back to probably within a ½ inch of the wood. From there, I'm gonna come over to where that little stopper block is. I'm going to tighten up the set screw on that, so we're going to have maybe like a ½ inch gap, and you'll see why that's important. It'll actually save a lot of time. So alright, so we're probably about a ½ inch away. I'm going to tighten up that stopper, so now we're ready to split. Now, depending on what type of wood you're splitting, it's kind of gonna change how you need to manage the wood as you're splitting it. But for the most part, I'll split through the wood as far as I think I need to go. I'll keep one hand holding down that lever to prevent this pusher from sliding back. I'll take the other hand and I'll just make sure that I can peel the piece apart. At this point, we're halfway split through it. As you can see, we got a good split going, but I can't tear it apart yet. So what I'm going to do now, turn the motor back on, and I'm going to run this ram out all the way and just try and let the splitter do most of the splitting here. All right, so we're all the way through, and as you can see now, there's some kind of nasty nest in here, but yeah, I basically allowed the splitter to do most of the work, and it just made it so much easier to tear it apart. So, all right, now I want to continue to split, and because we have that stopper set, I can take the next piece, just drop it right in. I don't have to wait for that piston to start extending again. Turn the motor on, split right through. As you can see, that time I was able to tear it apart pretty easily. Because I'm close to my wood stack, I can take these pieces, throw them right on the stack. As you can see, once you get good at this, you actually can get moving pretty quick. Gotta keep going. Weird nest in there, whatever the hell that is. Alright, throw these pieces back on the stack. Now I know what you're probably saying. You're probably saying, well, my big gas splitter with the 4-way wedge could split much faster than that. Well, in some ways it probably could. But I think a lot of times with those gas splitters, they're actually lower to the ground, and you gotta do a lot more huffing and heaving. The thing I like about this is it's up high. It's like at working height. You know, it's just a little bit below my waist, so it's comfortable. Yes, a lot of the time your gas splitter probably could, in theory, split the wood apart a little bit quicker, but I think this unit is a little bit more efficient. It's quiet. I don't need to wear hearing protection. I can hear myself think. I can hear the birds. I can hear anybody coming on the property. Closing thoughts, I really think this is a fantastic splitter, especially for the price point and being able to get it shipped right to your door, and then hassle-free returns if you have any problems with it. I think you definitely want to build some kind of table. The table just makes it so much easier and enjoyable to split wood. But once you get good at this and you understand how to split this wood and how to work with the machine, I mean, you can split wood pretty darn fast. I think it's really valuable that you're able to lift up this machine easily, position it close to your wood stack so that way you don't have to walk really far, because when it comes to dealing with firewood, we want to be as efficient as possible, right? We want to be able to take the wood, put it in the splitter, stack it, preferably all in the same spot, which we can just about do that. Of course, I had to take a few steps to the trailer. I could get a little bit closer, whatever. Aside from that, if you start having problems with your splitter, meaning that it feels like there's air in it or it's struggling to extend all the way, make sure you have your bleeder cracked open. Make sure that you check the oil every now and then, the hydraulic oil, because it does seem like it loses a little bit, but I mean, for the $8 or $9 it is for a quart of Dextron ATF fluid, I mean, it's really not a big deal. I got the same problem going on with my dump trailer. Frame, a little bit rickety, but it does the job. Just make sure the unit's level, make sure you have a power source nearby, make sure you have a 15 amp outlet. If you're trying to power this with like a 10 amp outlet, or you have a lot of other things plugged into that line, you may risk tripping the breaker or the GFI, because you're probably going to have a GFI if it's outside. But overall, I would buy this unit again in a heartbeat, even though it was a gift for me. I think there's a lot of value in being able to come outside whenever you want and just hit a button and go to work. Also, you can run this thing in the garage if you want to stay inside, stay warm in the wintertime, split some wood in there. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you need to do that, or if you want to split some smaller kindling pieces, it's great for that. I do keep this unit outside. I actually really haven't had this unit in the garage at all. I do need to get a proper tarp or something to cover this unit, but what I'll do, I'll just loosen up the set screw, retract the piston all the way so that's protected, so it's inside. And I just have a little black garbage bag. I just cover this baby up, try and make sure that the motor's covered and the electronics are covered, and it's been doing just fine being outside. So, great unit. I totally recommend it. I'd recommend building the table. You just gotta watch out for these side pieces. If you're doing large pieces like I'm doing, they do tend to tear away, strip out the bolts. Now, if you want to see this unit try and split some of those big 22, 24-inch pieces of red oak, well, you're just going to have to subscribe to the channel, because I will put this unit through some thicker wood in the future. But that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.